Welcome back. The month of March is dedicated to Women's History Month, and I want to take this time to give a quick shout out to our all women team here at Open Tuesday. Now, in honor of Women's History Month, Jennifer Herrera of the National Women's History Museum joins me for a discussion on the recognition of female achievements and the importance of preserving that information in our country. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
So, as I mentioned, it's Women's History Month. Can you tell me about your organization and how you actually celebrate the month?
Yes, I'm with the National Women's History Museum. We are the nation's leading cultural institution dedicated to sharing the stories of women throughout history and including up to present day and contemporary women that are making history.
Now, I understand that you have a resource toolkit on your website. Can you tell me what that is and what you're actually offering this year?
Yeah, for all of the big months of the year, Black History Month, Pride, Women's History Month, we publish a resource toolkit that has a resource for every day of the work week. So that way, educators and students and corporations can have this ready-made package toolkit filled with resources and events and programs to really celebrate that month and explore the women's contributions throughout throughout the month.
Now, quoting a really important line from this resource, Women's History Month seeks to correct the imbalance. Can you explain what this imbalance is and why your organization really wanted to highlight this?
Yeah, every March, all eyes are on women's accomplishments and women's history because it is Women's History Month. But for so long, women have been left out of the national narrative, and we really seek to correct that. We want to bring forth the stories of women that have been forgotten or, quite frankly, omitted from our national narrative and really embed them in the fabric of the conversations that we're having today. So we seek to correct this imbalance by highlighting not just the accomplishments and contributions, but the history itself, the challenges, the voices, the stories. We want every women's story and every voice to have a platform, to have a place to be heard and shared and celebrated.
Now, I understand that your organization actually conducted some research on women's history titled Where Are the Women? One, love that title, so I'm so happy you guys chose that. I think it really speaks to the situation at hand. Can you tell me more about this study and what you actually found?
Yeah, so we released this study called Where Are the Women in 2017, and it looked at the representation of women in US state social studies standards. So really, what are we teaching our kids? What are students growing up learning about women? And what we found with this groundbreaking study was kind of obvious, right? Women are not taught. Women, when they are taught, it's very episodic. So you might learn about, let's say, Amelia Earhart growing up. But the story of women's involvement in aviation really begins and ends in the classroom with Amelia Earhart. And so we really want to work to change that. We want that educators to have access to the tools to teach women's history and to bring more women into the classroom and into the curriculum, but also for students to have an opportunity to learn about all of the women that really are missing from these history books.
Now, according to your research, fewer than 11% of textbook references are devoted to specific women in K through 12 state history standards and curricula in the United States as of 2017, as you mentioned. Do you feel our schools today are still struggling when it comes to education about women's history?
Absolutely. We're doing better. It's more accessible. Women's history is more accessible now than ever before, but we really need to give our educators the tools in which to teach women's history. And it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one-stop shop. There's so much to do to give these educators the tools it's not because there's not a lack of interest on the part of our educators. It's a structural problem that we have, and it's not limited to textbooks. It's to look at public sculpture and monuments to women. Look at street signs. Women are largely missing from our national narrative across our entire country in every aspect of our culture and society. So really, it's about correcting an entire system to incorporate women's history in really every aspect of our lives. So that way it's not rare, it's there. Because we know that the history, women have been here all along. We're 51% of the population, but our stories are missing. So we really seek to change that.
Can you tell me about some things your organization has done to ensure that people, but especially the youth, stay educated about the advancements women have made in history?
Yeah, well, we have developed a really incredible, rich website that is free for all to access. It's filled with hundreds and hundreds of biographies of contemporary women, of women from history, and it explores their accomplishments. It's such a great resource to have at your fingertips, a collection of these biographies. But also we have resources for educators. We have classroom lesson plans and virtual field trips and virtual exhibits. We also do a lot of programming. So for instance, we have a program called Brave Girls Virtual Storytime, where we invite an author to come and read their book to classrooms virtually and take Q&As with the children and their educators. We have a program called Sundays at Home that invites people to take a women's history break every Sunday, not every Sunday, a couple Sundays a month, to explore topics related to women's history. You know, women's history it should not be episodic, right? It needs to be folded into everything we do, and it needs to be accessible. So one of the things we're really proud of is that our content is free, it is accessible, and it is widely accessed by more than 4 million visitors a year to our website.
So, something that I really love about your website as a woman of color is that it focuses on intersectionality. Now, I've learned a lot about intersectionality in feminism and women's history through elective courses and from social media. How would you say social media has impacted what young adults and even teens know about women's history?
Well, it's made it more accessible. I'm surprised and delighted at the content creators that are out there pushing women's history to their audiences. It is much more accessible than ever before. And so I think that younger generations will have an easier time accessing this history as we go forth, but not just accessing past history. You know, history is now. We are living through history. And if you see that with things like COVID, we created a journaling project called Women Writing History because we wanted to make sure that the voices of young girls and women were not lost to history during this pandemic. So we really want to make sure that it's not just the history of the past, but that contemporary voices are being recorded and shared so that way we don't ever have to play catch up again.
So I kind of want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. You said that women's history shouldn't be episodic. I think that's really amazing because I see that a lot with these history months. We tend to focus on it during that month. What do you think we should do to make sure that we are honoring and celebrating women every month of the year and not just in March?
Well, thank you so much for that question. Here at the National Women's History Museum, we certainly celebrate women's history all year long. And I think what it really comes down to is being intentional about sharing the stories, being intentional about inclusion and access, and really letting it be top of mind all year long. If you're putting together a newsletter at work, if you're having conversations with people, it's really in the daily work that we do to uplift and bring these stories to light. You know, one other thing that's really important to our institution is that, of course, there are all these incredible pioneering women who have done incredible work, and we are so excited to celebrate them and share their stories. But also, you don't have to be an astronaut for your story to matter. You just have to be. And so we really want to make sure that especially young children can see themselves in the incredible women on whose shoulders we stand, but also know that their story and their voice matters, even without going to space. That every woman's story matters.
So I'm really happy that you said that. I thought that was kind of a beautiful thing to say, and I think it will resonate with a lot of women and girls watching. What do you think could be done now to ensure young women and girls aren't waiting until Women's History Month or to go to college to understand the important role they play in society?
Well, I think we just need to continue to lift them up. We need to empower our young girls to really, the idea that if you can see it, you can be it. That's part of what we work really hard to showcase, but also just making sure they know that they're important and that their voice has worth. And the more we can rally around this idea as a society, the more we will be able to empower and inspire future generations that come after us.
So before we go, I just want to know some women that inspire you. Can you just give a shout out to some amazing women that inspire you every day?
Oh, yes. Well, I have some really strong women in my family that I love, my mom and my aunt, and my grandmothers. But really, I know a bunch of really strong women that work tirelessly in civic engagement to make the world a better place. So I'm really honored to know them. And as one more, I really like Lucille Ball, too.
So where can people go to learn more about your organization?
Yes, thank you. Please visit us on our website, which is womenshistory.org. We hope you go there and spend some time learning about women, but also joining us at our events. We have so many virtual events, and we're gearing up to do some in-person events again now that the pandemic has changed a little bit, that we can safely have some in-person events. So join us. Really, our virtual events, no matter where you are in the world, you can tune in and join us and learn. So we really invite you to come and visit our website.
And so we have just under a minute left, but I also want to talk about the importance of not just women. It's not just for women. I'm sure it's also for people who are allies, people who want to learn how to support women. Could you quickly just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, women's history is American history. And as the mom of 3 boys, I think it's really important that we teach our sons and our young men the importance of women's contributions as well. Women's history is everyone's history. And so it is our responsibility to tell a complete and accurate and inclusive history, because you're not getting an accurate history without it. So while we focus on women's history specifically, it really could be said for all of these histories, all of the voices that are not always at the table. So it's inclusive history is accurate history. Inclusive history is good history. So that's our mission.
Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. If you take a look at the screen, you will see their social media where you can learn more and see all of these resources. Once again, thank you so much for joining me, and happy Women's History Month. We'll be right back with more Open BxRx Tuesday.